Anthony in Little Rock, how are you? Thanks for waiting.
Hi, I just want to say thanks. I'm a first-time caller, and it's nice to talk to you guys, Matt and Tracie.
Hey,
Hello.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I've got a question. I consider myself Catholic. My son was raised Catholic as well, but he recently told me about 3 months ago that he does not think that he believes in religion or God anymore. And while I didn't get upset with him or anything, because why get upset? I started having doubts myself, and I guess the question that I'm asking is, when the two of you were, religious, and you were, going on your journey to be a, atheist, did you feel guilty when you first started to not believe or question what you've been told?
I have to say that my journey was a little different, so I didn't go through that. I think I experienced a lot of fear, or I don't know if I'd call it guilt, but it's hard to remember back that far. But I know I was very anxious about the time before I adopted a belief, because I just had this sort of overwhelming fear because I had internalized all these horror stories about what was going to happen to me if I didn't believe. So when I was trying to sort of make myself believe and find the sign or get whatever I needed from God to force me to believe so that I could be one of these people that wasn't scared of going to hell anymore, I kind of went through my anxiety then. And then when I became a believer, of course, I was so happy because all that could go away now, and I didn't have to deal with all that horrible, monsters under the bed that they had threatened me with all those years as a child. And so that relief, was just, it was like ecstatic, right? Because now I'm saved and everything's happy. And so later, when I started to doubt, what really happened was there were people who I met at college that were talking to me about early, apocryphal books. And if you're a Catholic, you may actually be aware of some of these. They were news to me. But there's, these apocryphal books that are not included in the Bible that, the Catholic Church is very big on cataloging those, and they pretty much had the whole corner on how the Bible got put together and where these other books were. And, so the Catholic history was extremely helpful to me when I was confronted by this with my friends at college that were saying that my understanding of how the Bible was put together and my understanding of the history of Jesus was not quite accurate. I actually went to the library at my university to find this information so that I could show them they were wrong, and I ended up finding out that I was wrong. And so it wasn't like a guilty thing because I wasn't just sitting there sort of in isolation having doubts. I was very, very good Christian going in there to prove my religion, and then found out that I was incorrect on my assumptions and the things that I'd been taught. And so at that point, I started to doubt my church teachings and the Bible, but I didn't feel guilty. I felt like I wanted to tell them and share that with them because they should know, because I don't want them to believe wrong things either. So I went to talk to them about it, and they didn't want to hear it and weren't very receptive to it, and felt like I needed to get back in line, even though I was showing them the information that they were wrong. And then at that point, I still believed in God, so I wasn't even doubting God. And it took about 10 years before I finally started to I was just investigating. I kept changing my view of God, like, what is God? And I would talk to somebody else, and they would shoot holes in something that I believed, or they would have these challenges, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that doesn't really make sense. So maybe God's not like this, maybe God's like this. And it just never even dawned on me that there might not be a God, right? That all these different models and things might just be different things that people were making up. And so ultimately, when it one day dawned on me that there wasn't a God, that I was just simply looking for what basically existed, which was the universe, that was when I was sort of like, oh yeah. But it was such a long journey, and it had gone through so much taffy pulling to get there, that by the time it hit me, it was almost like, oh yeah, because it was just such a long experience. But you're not alone. I mean, there's a lot of people that have fear and doubt and guilt and all kinds of things when they start to question. I mean, totally. Just because it didn't happen to me, we get letters all the time like what you're describing.
And I didn't feel guilty. My process was entirely I was trying to be the best Christian I could be, to do what I was supposed to do, kind of along the lines of Tracie, except I didn't have the interaction with the church at that time. One thing I did feel guilty about was, and I don't anymore, was the fact that I had explicitly tried to lead others to Christ. I mean, this thing that I now recognize, I have no good reason to think that it's true, and so I felt a little guilty for misleading people. But I don't anymore, just for the same reason that I don't, blame my parents for raising me in the church. I mean, they were sincerely and honestly trying to do the best they could to teach their kids and raise them right according to what they understood. Now, there's a second question of should they still, be believing given the conversations and what they understand now. But yeah, I didn't have a guilt.
I have a question though, Anthony. Like for yourself, where do you think the guilt arises from? Like where do you think that's coming from?
Well, I would guess for me, it's just about when I've heard people talk about that that a believer believes because in part they're scared to die. They want to believe that something's something more than here, and I think a bit of it stems from that because I was a pretty sick kid growing up, and I still am rather. I have a lot of health problems now, and the simple fact is that the problems that I have could possibly, I could kick the bucket one day because of these issues.
Why do you think that would manifest in guilt rather than fear?
I guess I might have not chosen my words correctly, but I think that it's guilt because I guess it was expected of me when I was growing up. And now with my son telling me that he doesn't believe, like I said, I'm questioning. But he's not even told his mother yet, and it's been almost a year. And he told me he's afraid to tell his mom.
Do you think his fears are founded?
Well, given the things that we've talked about, him and I, when we get together and somehow the subject comes up, we'll talk about the things that can obviously be true in the Bible, but then somehow it always comes back for me that if I don't believe and something is there when I'm gone,
okay,
that I feel guilty for questioning and for doubting. And of course, the fear is there, and I can't even talk to my parents about this because they're very, I'm 44 years old, and my parents are dead set in their ways, and for me to walk in there, and tell them I don't believe would probably be like I'd be telling them I was gay.
Okay, so you have really two different issues going on. You've got the idea of disappointing your family. And then you also have the idea of disappointing, I guess, God, in case there's really a God there. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah,
I kind of think now that I hear it, said back to me, I think that's kind of how, kind of how I feel, yeah.
Now, let's just think about this for a minute. If you were God, let's just say, and you want people to believe in you, you want people to love you, and let's say that it is like, it's a good God, decent character, and one of your children that you created is thinking hard about the issue of your existence, and you're sort of sitting back watching it, and this person is struggling with it. And they want to believe. They want to be what you want. They don't want to disappoint you, but they're just having difficulty believing in you. Could you really see yourself like being angry or disappointed? Wouldn't you just be like kind of feeling for that person, almost like you are for your son? Wouldn't you have that sort of empathy and say, I understand the person's trying to do the right thing and they're struggling with this? And I mean, I have a hard time thinking that a God who really cares about you would be disappointed or upset with you if that's really how you were viewing it and you were just trying to be honest with yourself, don't you think?
I definitely see where you're coming from. And unfortunately for me, I've had the displeasure of talking to other believers, and they'll spew a verse or two.
Yeah.
It kind of hits me where I'm what I'm thinking.
Sure.
But then I start to think, well, if he really cared, for his creation, then wouldn't he have already known in the beginning that 2/3 of the planet probably wouldn't believe?
Yep.
Yeah, and not only that, but I guess what I'm wondering is, let's say that God really was upset at you, and He was really angry with you, and ready to shoot you to hell for these doubts that you're having, and for your son's inability to understand this as like a reasonable thing that he can subscribe to. I mean, would you even really want to worship a God like that?
That's what keeps coming back to me. The more I've read certain things, certain sites with different people giving their views on why there isn't, or why there probably isn't, as opposed to people that believe that there is.
Mm-hmm.
I keep coming back to the science part and everything, and I'd like to think I'm a decently logical person. So if something doesn't make sense to me,
okay,
then usually other things in that area will not make sense.
Sure.
And so I'm conflicted because on one hand I'm like, I've been believing for 35 odd years, and that these things happen. God is with us, and He's watching over us and stuff like that. But then I think of things like the creation story and how that's not even remotely true in any way. I think about the Noah's Ark flood story. That's
Sure.
not remotely possible in any way. So if the Bible's already filled with all these contradictions and stuff, then how can I continue to believe that it's a holy book?
Well, yeah, but you're still having an emotional reaction to it, this visceral like fear and guilt and that you're experiencing. And I guess what I'm trying to do is I want you to be able to investigate this without fear, right? I want you to be able to give all of this information an honest look, right? I ultimately don't care what conclusions you draw, right, for yourself. You're going to have to figure this out for yourself. But what I want is for you to not feel badly, to not feel guilty, to not feel fearful, just for investigating and asking questions and trying to figure out what you think is true. So what I'd like for you to be able to internalize as like a new way of looking at this, if you're capable of it, would be the idea that if God is a good God, then that God should be accepting of you doing whatever you need to do to try to figure out what you think is true, right?
We have completely run out of time. I apologize.
Can you hold?
But if you can hold, we can talk to you more after the show's over.